Welcome to Pollen Weather by Pollen Wise App. It's Friday, July 31st. I'm Landon Bunderson, and this is the place for daily allergy news and forecasts. Following up from our Wednesday video, we're going to talk about the sources of mold spores, but first we'll do the forecast. Things today are looking an awful lot like yesterday for pollen. The western half of the continent is going to be hot and dry, and a lot of the pollen levels are going to peak in the 50s. The eastern half of the continent is going to be rainy, and pollen will peak in the 40s. Obviously, where rain falls, pollen and mold will drop to zero. Mold is getting a bit unruly in the Midwest, and rain is the only thing holding it back. Some continued very high mold levels in northern Utah, and Albuquerque will have high levels as well. Air quality is poor in the northeast U.S. coast, and there are some poor air spots in pockets across the west. Southern California continues its streak of poor air quality, although things have shifted around a little bit, thanks to a little bit of wind. Temperatures in the Midwest and Northeast are mild. If only the humidity would ease up, things might just be tolerable. Fairly normal temps for most of the rest of you. Even though mold is an important airborne allergen, it is very poorly understood. When we talk about pollen seasons, it's relatively easy to identify the source and the timing of the pollen. It's an oak tree, or it's bluegrass. It pollinates in March, or it pollinates in May. But what about mold? What is it? Where does it come from? Well, mold is a type of fungus that often produces microscopic spores that become airborne. Those spores can be very allergenic. There are many different kinds of mold, but probably the most recognizable is the green and white fuzzy stuff that grows on your old oranges or bread. That fuzzy-looking stuff is made up of a network of microscopic threads called hyphae. At the ends of those hyphae, there are structures called fruiting bodies. Those are the parts of the mold that produce spores. The sources of mold spores in the outdoor environment are often more difficult to recognize than the fuzzy stuff on your orange. Many of the mold spores that come from the outdoor environment are saprophytes, which mean they consume dead organic material. So why do you need to know this? Well, if you're keeping an eye out for sources of mold, you should be looking for places where there is an abundance of leaves, logs, old grass clippings, or something like that. If you have dead plant material and moisture, you're going to have mold. This is why mold isn't as clockwork as pollen. It relies much more heavily on perfect conditions. Mold is also ever present beneath the soil, feeding on dead or dying roots. Keeping an eye out for high concentrations of mold isn't that difficult. If you see a dust cloud coming from compost, leaf litter, grass clippings, bark mulch, or excavation, get as far away from its path as you can. Just like with pollen, if you can avoid being near a source of mold where the concentrations are extremely high, you'll be better off. But if the concentrations are high everywhere, you'll have to wear a mask or go inside to keep your exposure low. Hopefully this information helps you reduce your exposure to mold. Check out the Pollen Wise app if you want hourly pollen and mold counts, and like and subscribe to this channel if you want more information and forecasts.